We rolling?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Dr. Cindy Otto. I am an associate professor of critical care and sports medicine at the University of Pennsylvania Ryan Veterinary Hospital. I'm also the founding director of the Penn Vet Working Dog Center. And we're here to kind of talk about some of the events that led to the founding of the Working Dog Center, which revolve around my response associated with the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The things that we need to think about when we're talking about this is, why was I even involved in 9/11? I'm a veterinarian, I do emergency medicine, but my interest really was sparked in the early 90s when I started to learn about search and rescue dogs and the kind of work that they did. And in about 1993 or 94, I joined the Pennsylvania Task Force 1 Urban Search and Rescue Team, which is a FEMA-based team, so it's a federally based team that is designed to respond to national disasters. On those teams, there are 4 dogs that have to be deployed when the team is deployed. But what the organization sort of has done is that they put the medical care of those dogs into the hands of the physicians and the paramedics and EMTs that respond with the team. And I found as a veterinarian that was an inappropriate way to care for these dogs, which are so important in the response. So I became involved with the team as a veterinarian, not as a dog handler, but really to pay attention and try and help with the care and the preventive medicine and also anything in response to an event. I went to Hurricane Floyd in North Carolina with the team and kind of learned a little bit more about what it was like to be in the field under a deployment setting. And on 9/11, when the airplanes hit the towers, it wasn't long before we got the call that our team was going to be heading up to New York. It was actually about 1 o'clock in the afternoon when they finally gave us the official call down. We were asked to then meet at the Philadelphia Fire Academy with all of our gear and be ready to be gone for up to 10 to 14 days. The team assembled there, including the 4 dogs that responded, and we arrived in New York at the Javits Center at about midnight on September 11th. The whole process of getting there was pretty crazy, going into New York, trying to find a way in when everybody was coming out of New York. All of the medical emergency response vehicles were lined up, and the roads were pretty much empty. I remember distinctly our bus going around in circles until we found our way into the city, going through the Lincoln Tunnel, but through a very secure screening process, and then working our way down to the Javits Center, which was the place that they decided that people would be setting up camp. The Javits Center, which is a big convention center, was in the midst of some sort of convention, and there were all sorts of booths set up all over the place, and so we kind of took over and set up our camp there. I was the only veterinarian that was part of the team and the only veterinarian that was part of all of the FEMA groups that were assembling there. So I was pretty concerned about how we were going to take care of the medical issues that these dogs might face. Happily, the community was mustering a huge amount of support, and the local veterinary groups created a veterinary care station on West Street, and so a lot of the care for the dogs was provided there. But my job was to be at the site. We were down at Ground Zero, and really take care of the dogs, be there to make sure that there weren't any issues, and if anything did come up, that I would go ahead and care for the dogs, providing sort of guidance for when they should rest, which was one of the hardest things because there was such a demand for these dogs to find the people that we knew must be there and must still be alive. And that was really challenging because the dogs needed some time to stop. and really think about, getting something to drink and not becoming dehydrated, and sort of balancing the challenge from our urgency in finding people to the safety, and actually the ability for these dogs to do their job well was really important. I think there's a couple of things that I very distinctly remember. One being the impact that the dogs had on the workers, because I was working the night shift, and it usually was about a 12 to 16-hour shift, and things were all artificially lit, and there was a lot of noise and glaring lights. It was a little bit like a movie set of a really bad movie. And the lines and lines of rescue workers just sort of marching to the pile and back and trying to remove debris and search for people was so lacking in emotion, because they were so focused on their job, and they were so stoic, and there were no smiles, there was no conversation. It was just, get the job done. But when they'd see a dog, it changed how they felt. It changed how they looked. There would be a smile. There would be a memory, or sort of thinking to their dog at home, the comfort that those dogs provide. And that was a really important function that we hadn't anticipated that the dogs would play. As we moved along, and there were no survivors that were found, really moved into a recovery process where the dogs were focused on helping identify the human remains, and that was an important part of what was going on. Luckily, most of the time that we spent there, the injuries were pretty minor. They were limited to cuts and scrapes, and even those cuts and scrapes were very minor. Only 4 dogs had to have stitches in all of the dogs that worked, so that was incredible. While we were there, it was apparent, though, that we needed to know what impact this was going to have on the dogs. We were worried about their health, about their safety, and so the sort of seed was planted that we need to follow these dogs. We need to follow their health, but also their behavior. Were there any ill effects of this devastating trauma on the dogs? Did they have any PTSD-like symptoms? Were they going to be influenced by this? Were they going to be put off work in the future? And so we put together a proposal, and the AKC Canine Health Foundation funded a study so that we could follow the dogs and monitor them. And that's been a really helpful thing, because we were able to show that indeed, while they were working on site, that the injuries were very minor. These dogs were well prepared for the kind of work that they were doing. And they didn't have the respiratory problems during the response that a lot of the humans were already showing. Following these dogs now for 14 years, we can also say that they haven't had any long-term ill effects, which was just amazing. Many of the dogs have died of cancer, but we also know that in a group of search and rescue dogs that didn't respond, that served as our control group, those dogs also had an equal incidence of cancer. So we can't really associate any of the cancer with their response. It really is just part of what we see with dogs, with aging dogs, and particularly the breeds of dogs, the German Shepherds and Labradors that were the predominant breeds. So that's been a really important part of it. And it's the inspiration of what these dogs provided, both the emotional support for the people, the physical service that they provided, trying to find people who were lost and trapped, and then helping recover the human remains, and their ability to adapt to a completely new request has been really inspiring, and allowed us to open up this center where we are now, where we're training dogs for detection work, for search and rescue, for police, for medical detection. And that work, again, is really inspired by these dogs. And not only are we training the dogs, but we're gathering the information so that we can help all of these dogs and their handlers in the future respond in the safest and best way to events that might happen like 9/11. So I think I'm going to stop there.